February 28, 1997, began like any other Los Angeles morning. The city stirred to life, commuters weaving through traffic, radios murmuring weather reports, and the familiar pulse of another bright, easy Friday. But within minutes, that calm would fracture. At the corner of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Archwood Street, outside a Bank of America branch, two figures stepped into history. Dressed head to toe in black, each man wore layers of homemade armor, plates of steel, and Kevlar stitched beneath loose clothing, their faces hidden behind ski masks. They moved with the heavy rhythm of men carrying more than confidence. Beneath their coats were automatic rifles, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and a plan designed for war. Their names were Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Mătăsăreanu. Both had robbed banks before. Both knew how long it took for LAPD patrol cars to arrive after a silent alarm. But this time, they came ready for a fight, not a getaway, a confrontation. When the first officers arrived, the world still believed it was just another robbery. Within moments, television helicopters swarmed above, their cameras broadcasting what no one could have imagined. Two men standing calmly in a sea of gunfire, mowing down police cars, glass, and concrete. For 44 minutes, Los Angeles turned into a battleground. Bullets tore through the air, almost 2,000 rounds in all. A sound that echoed across live television, feeds from coast to coast. Viewers sat frozen, watching an urban war unfold in real time. By the time it was over, both robbers were dead. 12 officers and 8 civilians were injured. Streets were shredded with shell casings. Patrol cars looked like wreckage from a war zone. And America was left staring at its reflection, a country armed to the teeth, caught off guard by its own reality. The North Hollywood shootout wasn't just a crime. It exposed the growing gap between criminals and police firepower. It forced departments across the country to rethink what it meant to be ready. This is that story. Before the smoke, before the chaos, there were two men, both outsiders who carried their resentments like fuel. Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. was born in Denver, Colorado, in 1970. On paper, he was unremarkable, a real estate hustler with a short temper and a long trail of petty crimes. But beneath that, there was something else, an obsession with power. He spent hours lifting weights, studying guns, and chasing the thrill of control. When friends drifted away, he turned to schemes, fake IDs, counterfeit checks, a string of small-time frauds that ended with him behind bars. Phillips didn't fear the law. He studied it. Every encounter with police taught him how to be harder, smarter, quieter. By his late 20s, he wasn't just lifting weights. He was designing bulletproof vests from scraps, sketching out robbery plans, timing police response calls on scanners. In 1989, he met Emil Mătăsăreanu at a Gold's Gym in Venice, California. That meeting would change both their lives. Emil was nothing like Larry, or at least, not at first glance. He was born in Timisoara, Romania, and moved to the U.S. as a child after his family fled Ceausescu's dictatorship. He had a soft face and an engineer's mind. He could repair computers, build circuits, and even write code. But beneath the technical skill was something bruised. Emil had been bullied as a kid for his accent and his weight. He carried those scars into adulthood. He tried to make an honest living, starting a computer repair business called Decibel Incorporated, but it failed. His marriage fell apart soon after. By his early 30s, he was living alone, angry and broke. A man who believed the system had cheated him. Larry Phillips became the answer to that frustration. Together, they became what the LAPD would later call the High Incident Bandits. They were meticulous, rehearsed, and heavily armed. In 1993, they ambushed an armored truck in Littleton, Colorado, killing a guard and escaping with cash. Later, in Los Angeles, they hit multiple Bank of America branches, fast, controlled, and brutal. They carried Norinco rifles, illegally modified to fire fully automatic, and trained themselves in tactical shooting at desert ranges. Their robberies weren't spontaneous crimes. They timed police dispatches, scouted banks for weeks, and even customized their weapons for maximum fire rate. But their ambition kept growing. The small hauls, A few $100,000 here and there weren't enough. They wanted to pull off something legendary. Their luck, however, began to fracture. In October 1993, Glendale police stopped their car after noticing a speeding red Pontiac. The officers didn't know who they'd pulled over. When they opened the trunk, they found a small armory, rifles, pistols, body armor, smoke bombs, wigs, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. The men were arrested, but through plea bargaining, the charges were reduced to misdemeanors. They served 100 days in jail, had their guns confiscated, and then, shockingly, most of their other equipment was returned. After this encounter, they decided to double down. They practiced relentlessly. They built armor from old vests and steel plates. They experimented with drugs to calm their nerves, phenobarbital to steady their hands, and ephedrine to heighten focus. They even stitched watches into their gloves so they could track how long it took the police to respond. They knew they couldn't just steal. They needed to dominate. By mid-1996, they were preparing for their biggest score yet. The Bank of America branch on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. They picked it carefully. The bank sat on a corner with wide visibility, a large parking lot, and only 2 major exits. They knew it would take roughly 8 minutes for the LAPD to arrive once the alarm was triggered. 8 minutes to enter, seize the cash, and vanish. That was the plan. But like every perfect plan, it was fragile. One change in timing, one mistake, and everything could collapse. In the early morning hours of February 28, 1997, the 2 men loaded their white 1987 Chevrolet Celebrity with 5 rifles, a pistol, body armor, and a glass jar of gasoline. Their failsafe for burning evidence. They each carried hundreds of rounds of ammunition. They believed they were unstoppable. And in their own minds, maybe they were. The city around them was still waking up. Traffic lights switching from red to green, sprinklers ticking through quiet neighborhoods. No one knew that 2 men, both once dismissed as failures, were about to turn an ordinary Los Angeles morning into one of the most prolonged and most violent gun battles in American history. Dawn broke clean and warm over Los Angeles. The sky above the San Fernando Valley was streaked with gold. Palm trees swayed in a light breeze, and the first hints of traffic rolled out along Laurel Canyon Boulevard. It was the kind of Friday morning that promised calm, paydays, coffee runs, and quiet errands before the weekend. But for Larry Phillips and Emil Mătăsăreanu, this wasn't a morning for calm. It was execution day. They had spent months preparing. They had mapped out every second, from the moment they exited the car to the moment they'd drive away. 8 minutes, that was their window. Each man carried a small watch stitched into the back of his glove. Phillips had set both watches to the same alarm tone. When it rang, they would be gone. Before they left, Emil swallowed his prescribed phenobarbital, the barbiturate meant to calm his seizures. He said it steadied his nerves. Phillips said nothing. He loaded the rifles into the trunk, 2 Norinco Type 56, a Bushmaster XM15, and an HK91. All are illegally modified for full automatic fire. The white 1987 Chevrolet Celebrity they drove was plain, forgettable, a commuter's car. The irony wasn't lost on them. They were planning to unleash war from something that looked like a grocery getter. At 9:16 a.m., the car turned into the parking lot of the Bank of America at 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. To passing drivers, it was just another vehicle. Phillips killed the engine. The 2 men pulled black ski masks over their faces and stepped into the morning light. Across the street, 2 LAPD patrol officers, Lauren Farrell and Martin Perello, noticed something odd. The men weren't just wearing dark clothing. They were armored, heavy, unnatural for the heat, and Farrell squinted. Then he saw the rifles. He reached for the radio, 1543, requesting assistance. He said, his voice steady but sharp, possible 211 in progress. Bank of America, North Hollywood. Inside the bank, a customer approached the ATM near the entrance. Phillips grabbed him by the collar and shoved him inside. The man hit the floor. A security guard saw the commotion and tried to radio his partner outside, but the call never went through. Phillips shouted, "This is a holdup." His voice cracked through the bank's tiled air like thunder. Both men fired into the ceiling, the sound ripping through glass and metal. Shell casings clattered to the floor. The smell of gunpowder filled the lobby. Customers froze. Tellers dropped behind counters. Phillips stood near the door, controlling the room. Mătăsăreanu stormed toward the vault, his Norinco rifle at his hip. The assistant manager, John Villagrana, was trembling as he fumbled with the vault combination. The vault opened, but something wasn't right. There wasn't as much cash as expected. Due to a delivery change, most of the money had been picked up the night before. Instead of $750,000, only a fraction remained. Mătăsăreanu's frustration boiled over. He shouted, cursed, and emptied an entire drum magazine into the vault wall, the ricochets echoing like thunderclaps. Bank staff huddled together, praying the bullets wouldn't rip through. The alarm blared. Outside, the LAPD was already forming a perimeter. Phillips checked his watch. 2 minutes gone. Inside, Mătăsăreanu stuffed stacks of bills into a duffel bag. 3 die packs were unknowingly mixed in. The red ink would soon destroy most of their take. They had what they could carry. Phillips locked the vault door behind them and started for the exit. Outside, officers crouched behind patrol cars, pistols drawn. Most of them were armed with standard-issue 9mm Berettas and 38 revolvers. A few carried 12-gauge shotguns. None of it was enough. At 9:24 a.m., Phillips pushed open the bank's north door and stepped into daylight. His eyes swept the parking lot. Then he opened fire. The sound was deafening, a rolling, mechanical growl. Bullets shredded car doors, windshields, and asphalt. Officers dove for cover as sparks danced across the street. Detective William Krulak took cover behind a tree. Officer Martin Whitfield went down, hit multiple times. Another officer's vest stopped a round that would have torn through his chest. Phillips kept walking, calm, deliberate, firing in bursts. From the south door, Emil emerged, dragging the money bag. He fired in wide arcs across Laurel Canyon Boulevard, forcing officers to retreat. Glass from storefronts exploded behind them. Helicopters were already circling above. Reporters switched from traffic updates to breaking news. Millions of viewers at home were about to witness the kind of violence they had only seen in movies. In those first few minutes, the city changed. This was no longer a robbery. It was a war. The first rounds cracked through the morning like thunderclaps, echoing off storefronts and glass towers. Within seconds, North Hollywood was transformed. Cars screeched to a stop. Civilians hit the pavement. A helicopter crew from a local station banked hard and steadied its camera, unaware that it was capturing what would become one of the most iconic firefights in modern history. Down below, the air shimmered with heat and gun smoke. Phillips and Mătăsăreanu were no longer robbers trying to escape. They were standing armies. Phillips moved with the control of a man who had planned this moment for years. He fired in short bursts, switching from car to car, forcing officers to duck and scatter. His armor absorbed bullets that would have dropped any other man. When a 9mm round struck his chest, he barely flinched. He fired back, the muzzle flash cutting through the haze. Detective Tracy Angeles crouched behind a patrol car, her hands trembling as bullets punched holes through the metal around her. Every few seconds, she'd rise, fire twice, then duck again. Her rounds struck Phillips squarely in the torso, but nothing. They flattened against his vest and fell to the asphalt. Nearby, Officer Dean Haynes shouted for backup. He could hear bullets ricocheting off the street, one skipping past his leg, another slamming into his shoulder. The pain was immediate, but he stayed where he was, still firing, shouting positions to the others. The LAPD's standard-issue weapons, the Beretta 92F pistols, and 38 revolvers, were powerless against the robbers' steel and Kevlar armor. Each officer fired, knowing their bullets weren't doing enough, but retreat wasn't an option. They had wounded men behind them, and civilians still trapped inside the bank. Across the street, civilians pressed themselves flat behind cars. Some hid in nearby shops. Others crouched behind dumpsters or fled through alleyways. The sound of automatic fire was relentless. It didn't come in short exchanges. It came in rolling waves. Inside the LAPD command post, dispatchers struggled to make sense of the chaos. Officers from surrounding divisions were rushing to the scene. SWAT was on the way, but they were nearly 18 minutes out, stuck in downtown traffic during a training exercise. Until they arrived, the street cops were on their own. By 9:30 a.m., both gunmen had moved out into the open. Phillips advanced up Laurel Canyon, bullets sparking against the concrete at his feet. Every few steps, he paused, aimed, and fired, measured, precise, unhurried. To bystanders, he looked invincible. Mătăsăreanu moved with less grace but equal determination. He dragged the heavy duffel bag of cash behind him, taking cover by the getaway car. His thick Romanian accent could be heard through the chaos as he barked to Phillips, reloading his Norinco with a fresh drum magazine. An LAPD helicopter hovered overhead, but when Phillips raised his rifle and fired, the pilot pulled back fast. Even the air didn't feel safe. Then came the desperate improvisation. Officers broke into a nearby gun shop, B&B Sales, begging the owner for high-powered rifles. He handed over several AR-15s and boxes of 223 ammunition. The officers loaded them on the spot, using the back of a patrol car as arrest. It was the first time in LAPD history that beat cops fought with rifles on a public street. The difference was immediate. Rifle rounds began punching through cars and breaking apart chunks of the concrete planters the robbers were hiding behind. But still, their armor held. Phillips took a hit on the wrist. The blood was dark and quick, but he didn't stop. He dropped the damaged rifle, grabbed another from the trunk, and fired again. Detectives Vince Bancroft and Kevin Harley took up positions behind a low cinder block wall across from the bank. They fired carefully, counting each shot. Their goal wasn't to kill. It was to distract, to keep the robbers focused on them while paramedics crawled forward to drag away the wounded. In one surreal moment, a civilian truck driver tried to flee down the boulevard, only for bullets to rip through his windshield. He ducked, jumped from the cab, and sprinted for cover as glass and steel rained around him. Every few minutes, the gunmen switched positions. They used cars as shields, keeping police guessing. When a round hit Phillips' shoulder plate, he staggered but kept shooting. The fight was entering its 20th minute, and neither side had the upper hand. The police had numbers. The robbers had armor and firepower. When the SWAT unit finally arrived, they weren't in full gear. They had been on a morning run when the call came. They threw on armor over shorts and running shoes, grabbed rifles, and commandeered an armored truck to pull wounded officers out of the kill zone. By now, the area looked like a war film set. Smoke drifted from burning vehicles. The street was littered with shell casings and shattered glass. Reporters hovered in the air, narrating "Live to Millions." Viewers in living rooms across America watched officers crawl through the streets of Los Angeles under sustained gunfire, an image that seared itself into the country's collective memory. Phillips was still firing from the north side of the parking lot when another bullet tore through his left hand. He dropped his weapon. For a moment, he hesitated, staring at the blood. Then, almost defiantly, he picked it back up with one hand and kept firing. He was hit again, this time in the shoulder. His rifle jammed. He cursed, retreated toward the getaway car, and switched to his HK-91 rifle. The exchange of fire was unending, mechanical, and violent. At 9:52 a.m., the robbers began to retreat. Phillips and Mătăsăreanu climbed into their car and rolled down Archwood Street, firing through the windows as they moved. Police cars trailed from a distance, wary of the automatic fire. The chase snaked through residential blocks, a quiet neighborhood now filled with shattered glass, bleeding officers, and the sound of sirens that wouldn't stop. At one intersection, Phillips jumped from the car, still shooting. He backed behind a parked semi-truck, trying to clear a jammed rifle with one hand. The wound to his wrist made it nearly impossible. Officers across the street saw the opening. Conrado Torres fired first, hitting him in the right hand. Phillips looked down, his weapon useless. He drew his pistol, fired once, twice, then placed the barrel under his chin and pulled the trigger. He dropped instantly, his body still twitching under the echo of police return fire. The clock read 9:56 a.m. The 44 minutes were not over yet. Mătăsăreanu, still in the car, tried to flee east but was losing control. 3 of the tires had been shot out. The engine smoked. He rammed into another vehicle, backed away, and kept going. Officers surrounded him, firing in controlled bursts. He was hit in the legs, again and again. He crawled out, fell behind the car, and kept firing from the ground. His voice cracked through the chaos, shouting obscenities, daring police to finish it. SWAT officers moved in behind the armored truck. They fired from beneath the vehicle, bullets slicing through his unarmored legs. At 10:01 a.m., the gunfire stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise that came before it. The air still trembled with echoes of gunfire. Smoke hung low above Laurel Canyon like fog after a storm. Officers stood frozen in place, their ears ringing, their guns raised at a body that was no longer moving. Larry Phillips Jr. lay sprawled near the corner of Artwood Street and Hinds Avenue. His body armor was punctured in half a dozen places. A small handgun rested near his right hand. The man who had unleashed over 1,000 rounds into the streets of Los Angeles was gone. His final act, a single shot beneath his chin. But the city wasn't quiet yet. 3 blocks away, Emil Mătăsăreanu was still alive, still fighting. His Chevrolet Celebrity rolled awkwardly down Archwood, tires shredded, smoke pouring from the hood. He clutched his rifle, firing bursts through the broken windshield at any movement ahead. The car bumped the curb, skidded into a parked pickup, and came to a stop. Mătăsăreanu stumbled out, dragging himself behind the wreckage. He was bleeding from his legs, his voice hoarse from shouting. The bag of ruined cash lay beside him, soaked in red dye and blood. Across the street, SWAT officers crouched behind an armored truck. They had chased him from the main road, coordinating through radio static and hand signals. The order was clear: end it. Mătăsăreanu fired again, 2 short bursts, defiant but aimless. The round struck the side of a patrol car and scattered concrete dust into the air. The officers responded with precision fire, bullets hammering into his lower body where the armor didn't reach. He screamed, dropped his weapon, and tried to crawl away. 2 more shots cracked. His rifle slid from his hands. He was breathing, but barely. By 10:01 a.m., the shooting had stopped. After 44 minutes of unbroken combat, the North Hollywood shootout was over. Ambulances waited at the edge of the block, engines idling, but they couldn't move in. The scene was still hot. Officers had to confirm there were no more shooters, no secondary threats. Minutes passed, then half an hour. Mătăsăreanu lay in the gutter, cursing, his blood pooling around him. He taunted the officers, shouted for them to finish the job. They didn't. By the time paramedics were cleared to move in, more than 70 minutes had passed since the first shot. When they reached him, it was too late. The coroner later confirmed 29 bullet wounds, all below the waist. He had bled to death on the asphalt. When the gunfire finally stopped on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, the damage was impossible to ignore. The neighborhood was riddled with holes, shop fronts shattered, power lines are down, patrol cars shredded into twisted metal. Reporters were still broadcasting live, their voices unsteady as they tried to make sense of what viewers had just seen. 2 men lay dead, 18 people were wounded, including 12 police officers and 6 civilians. The asphalt looked like it had been bombed. Nearly 2,000 rounds of ammunition had been fired in less than an hour. The world had already seen everything. But for the Los Angeles Police Department, the scars went much deeper. The North Hollywood shootout revealed a terrifying imbalance between law enforcement and the criminals they faced. The officers who responded that morning were armed with standard-issue 9mm pistols and 38 special revolvers, weapons meant for routine patrols, not urban warfare. Their shotguns couldn't pierce the homemade armor that wrapped Larry Phillips and Emil Mătăsăreanu like steel. It was a mismatch from the first trigger pull. Within months, the LAPD rewrote its playbook. Every patrol car in Los Angeles began carrying AR-15-style semi-automatic rifles, weapons powerful enough to penetrate body armor. These rifles, once reserved for SWAT teams, became standard issue for surgeons and later for field officers. The department also began upgrading its sidearms, authorizing officers to carry 45 ACP pistols, such as the Smith & Wesson 4506 and 4566, matching the caliber once exclusive to elite units. Across the nation, police departments took notice. The image of Los Angeles patrolmen pinned down by two men with illegal assault rifles became a case study in vulnerability. By 1998, the Department of Defense donated 600 surplus M16 rifles to the LAPD. Patrol vehicles were fitted with Kevlar-lined doors, turning them into mobile shields. The incident also led to the adoption of new body armor standards, ensuring that no officer would again face rifle fire unprotected. Behind the scenes, the investigation unearthed the full scale of Phillips and Mătăsăreanu's operation. On April 17, 1997, officers raided a residence in Anaheim linked to the robbers. Inside, they found incendiary 7.62x 39 mm ammunition, ballistic helmets, multiple flak vests, and nearly $400,000 in stolen cash, remnants of earlier robberies. Among the recovered items was a short-barreled AR-15 with a red dot sight, later repurposed by a law enforcement agency as a training weapon. The LAPD's leadership moved quickly to document the lessons learned. On June 12, 1998, Chief Bernard C. Parks submitted a memorandum to the Board of Police Commissioners detailing every aspect of the firefight: badge numbers, firing distances, the number of rounds discharged, and even the officers' positions around the bank. Yet the aftermath wasn't only about weapons and tactics. It also became a legal and ethical storm. The family of Emil Mătăsăreanu filed a civil rights lawsuit against two LAPD officers, Detective James Wojtecki and Officer John Futrell, accusing them of letting him bleed to death after he surrendered. The 2000 trial ended in a mistrial after jurors were unable to reach a verdict. The case was later dropped after the family waived further prosecution, but the question lingered. Should paramedics have risked their lives to save a dying gunman who had already killed and maimed so many? Despite the controversy, the department stood by its men. The following year, 18 LAPD officers received the Medal of Valor for their actions during the shootout. They were honored in Washington, D.C., where they met President Bill Clinton, a symbolic recognition of bravery in the face of chaos. By 2004, the legacy of that day became part of Los Angeles history. Inside the LAPD Museum in Highland Park, two life-sized mannequins stood behind glass, each dressed in replicas of Phillips and Mătăsăreanu's body armor, their rifles mounted beside them. Nearby sat their bullet-riddled getaway car and Officer Martin Whitfield's damaged patrol vehicle, silent witnesses to the 44 minutes that changed policing forever. The shootout did more than push departments to arm their rank and file with semi-automatic rifles. It altered how law enforcement understood the threat itself. The distinction between patrol and combat blurred. SWAT teams, once built around submachine guns like the Heckler and Koch MP5, began switching to AR-15 carbines capable of long-range precision. For many officers, that shift carried both relief and unease. Relief, because they would never again face a fight so uneven. Unease, because they knew they were stepping into a new era, one where police and criminals were now equipped with nearly the same weapons. The North Hollywood shootout was the day America realized that its streets could mirror a battlefield, and that its guardians would have to evolve to survive.